Today's episode is one that really stayed with me long after we finished recording. You're going to meet Jonathan, a young stroke survivor whose life changed in a moment he never expected. And what makes this conversation so powerful isn't just what happened to him, but how he tried to make sense of it, rebuild from it, and eventually find direction again. I won't give away the details. That's Jonathan's story to tell, but I will say this. If you've ever struggled with the fear, uncertainty, or emotional weight that comes after a stroke, you may hear something in this journey that feels uncomfortably familiar and surprisingly reassuring. Now, before we get into it, I want to mention something quickly. Everything you hear, the interviews, the hosting, the editing, exists because listeners like you keep this going. When you visit patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke, you're supporting my goal of recording 1,000 episodes so no stroke survivor ever has to feel like they're navigating this alone. And if you're looking for something you can lean on throughout your recovery or while supporting someone you love, my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened, is available at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. It's the resource I wish I had had when I was trying to find my way. All right, let's dive into my conversation with Jonathan now. Jonathan Arevalo, welcome to the podcast.
Yes. Hi there, Bill.
Jonathan, tell me a little bit about what life was like before the stroke.
Well, life before stroke at 35 years old was good. It was really good. I had the opportunity to travel a lot, and also I worked for a company related in foods, and it was something that I had a passion for since I studied that in university when it came to studying chemistry, biology, and also food sciences. And during that time is what led prior to my stroke, which was in January 1st, 2021.
So you did, you worked in food sciences. What kind of work did that involve? What does a food scientist do?
So for that type of job, I worked as specifically it was QA coordinator, which I was in charge of all food products that come from all over the world into Canada, where I had to do audit checks, inspections, and make sure that every single fruits and vegetables had to meet the requirements, like which are government requirements, and also meeting specifications for the safety before it goes out to the public.
Wow. Was that a government job?
It was not a government job. It was more of a food company that is known in all over North America.
So just a very popular food importer, for example, that brings different products in and you've got to check them and inspect them. So what do? You opening boxes and looking literally at the food before it gets the tick?
Yes. So before anything gets accepted, I receive C of A's, which are certificate of analysis that come from different countries. And I need to go through all of those to make sure it meets government regulations and at the same time for the health and safety. So all of that, I had to make sure both reading it and as well physically inspecting myself. Yeah.
Understood. What about home life? What was that like? How were you, where were you living? Who were you living with?
Yes. So when it came to that, I was living in the city and I was living with an ex-girlfriend who I was during that time. And what it was a different change in life where I started to adjust a new relationship. And at the same time, I was adjusting in building my independence outside from home and starting like my own life differently. But everything went well until things started to change when it came to relationships and also work and also other things that came along with it over time.
What did you do for downtime? Do you have some hobbies, or are there some things that you enjoy doing after work or on the weekend?
Yes, yes. Usually, I would mostly hang out with friends, go out to meet up with friends to different places. We'd go out, out for dinner, out in the city. And also, I was very active, so we would go to different trails to do hiking, um, or also biking, going like riding the bike and all that.
Hmm.
So different activities like that to stay active.
Do you remember the day of the stroke? Like, did you start noticing something going wrong? What happened on that particular day? What was different about that day?
Yes, well, leading to the stroke, it was more during Christmas time. So in this exact same time in December, where it was leading to my stroke, that I started to get certain signs of, I wasn't too sure what it was though, because I was getting some headaches
Hmm.
and something very intense that I never had before, which are migraines. And that was leading prior to the stroke and starting the new year. And so then pretty much like on the 31st leading to January the 1st was the moment that I had my stroke. And and then my ex-girlfriend who I was with during that time, which is already almost 5 years, she noticed that my speech was going off. I had a lot of slurs in my words. I was getting like very intense headaches, and it just didn't seem normal. So she started to question and ask me questions that didn't make sense. So she automatically ended up calling emergency, and I got rushed uh, through emergency to the hospital, starting the new year.
Wow. So 1st of January 2021, was it?
Yes, January 1st, 2021. Correct.
Wow,
Yeah.
man. First day of the new year, straight into hospital.
Straight to the hospital. But not only straight to the hospital, but it was also during the time of COVID.
Uh-huh.
And so that made it even more complicated because in the hospital there was different cases going on at the same time, and whether it's doctors, nurses, or different people entering and going out, uh, there was a lot of restrictions that was going on, that a lot certain people weren't allowed to go in
Yeah.
unless it was an emergency purposes. And also I had to wear a mask and all that because they weren't sure whether I had COVID or it was something else.
So do you, is this a story that you remember, or somebody has told you about what happened that day? Because sometimes people hear the story from others, but they don't remember going through it or what they were thinking or what they were feeling. What were you thinking or feeling during this whole thing with the strange migraine and then being taken to the hospital?
Yeah, for me, I slightly remember, since I had very very like vague scenarios that I was that I still remember, but there's other occasions that I don't remember anymore. Like I lost a lot of that memory during that period of time because it happened so quickly that it was also a first time experiencing having a stroke. And but I do remember like certain scenarios of being picked up from paramedics and then being rushed to the hospital, and then from there not that much what happened afterwards, which is, yeah, which are certain things that I've forgotten, or it's hard to remember.
Yeah. So you're in the hospital. Do you understand when they tell you that we've discovered that you've had a hemorrhagic stroke? Like, are you aware of that? or is it just noise? What's it like to be told that you've had a bleed on the brain?
Yeah, I find it that is very hard to understand that because I didn't know what a stroke was in that time. And not only a stroke in general, but also the type of stroke that I had, which was a hemorrhagic stroke. But not only was it a hemorrhagic stroke, but it was as as uh, as like the couple of days passed by, I was also transferred to another hospital since the hospital where I was at, they didn't have the adequate neurologist and specialist for stroke. So I believe it was on the third day or something like that, I was taken to another hospital where they do have specialists, neurologists, and all that related to stroke. So they took my case because it was something very important. And at the same time, they didn't understand how I survived it as well, because it wasn't just a stroke. On the left side of my brain, they found that it was an AVM. So it's called anterior venous malformation, which could be caused from childbirth. As you get older, it could start to develop where you really don't know because it's internal. So, what triggered it was an aneurysm that made it rupture.
We'll be back to Jonathan's story in just a moment. I want to pause for a second and ask you something important. Why do you listen to this podcast? For many people, it's because they finally hear someone who understands what they're going through, or because they learn something that helps them feel less alone in their recovery. And here's the part most listeners never think about. This show only stays alive because of people like you help it keep it going. There's no big company funding it, no medical organization covering the cost. It's just me, a fellow survivor, doing everything I can to make sure these episodes exist for the next person who wakes up after a stroke and has no idea what happens next. When you support the podcast, you're making sure these conversations stay online. You're helping cover hosting and production fees, and you're making it possible for new survivors, months or even years from now, to find hope when they need it most. Some people think my support won't make a difference, but that's a misunderstanding. Every single contribution is what keeps this podcast available for free to the people who need it most. And if you want to go even deeper on your recovery, you can also grab a copy of my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened, at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. Yeah, I
And
know all about arteriovenous malformations. That's why I'm talking to you on this podcast, because I had one of those in my head on the right side near the cerebellum, and it bled for the first time in February 2012 was the first time my one bled. But I had numbness on my left side, the entire left side, for a whole week before I went to the hospital. And then when they scanned my head, they said, we found a shadow on your brain. The shadow on my brain is the white part on the brain scan on the MRI that reveals the bleed. And uh, the bleed was caused by this blood vessel, faulty blood vessel that they called an AVM, that burst and then created a lot of trouble, right? And then the whole journey begins, and then it's just starting out. So with mine, eventually they removed it from my head with brain surgery. How did they rectify the bleed in your brain? What did they do to stop it bleeding?
well, it didn't. It stopped on its own, actually. So,
Sometimes they
so
do that. I was told that sometimes they stop on their own and that don't have to take any further action. But with mine, it bled another 2 times, and they had to have brain surgery. But with yours, luckily, it stopped bleeding on its own.
yes, Bill. So in reality, it was a miracle. It was a miracle behind it because it stopped the bleeding, but it also drained the bleeding that was inside. So it was like a drainage on its own. And that's the miracle itself. And and the doctors had a team of 10 in the hospital trying to monitor me and see exactly how did it happen, and at a young age, and someone that's healthy and doesn't have a history of being in the hospital or anything such as that. So that was the miracle itself.
Mm.
So the neurologist ended up with their team. Um, they ended up having I had an angiogram, and the angiogram was done. It's done through like the side of the groin that goes up
Hmm.
to your head, which they try to detect exactly the AVM. And that's how they were able to find only one specific one that ruptured.
Yeah. I had the same procedure through the groin, and they put the contrast into the brain, and then they take photos of that, and then it shows exactly where it's bleeding. Uh, and that's an interesting experience because you're awake the whole time,
Yes.
and they go past your heart, and they go up into through your neck, and then they go into your brain.
Yes.
Pretty crazy.
It is. It was like an experience that it's hard to explain, but I
Mm.
felt like electricity in my body. And I don't know why I felt electricity in my body, but I felt like shocks in my brain, or
Same.
like or like
Fireworks.
yeah, like fireworks.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what's happening?
Yeah.
But the hardest part, Bill, was the fact that I had a lot of difficulties in speaking. So words wouldn't come out. I was for me it was I try to like explain myself through like I don't know how to say it. I like emotion. So like facial expression,
Hmm.
kind of like when you feel in pain or something like that, or you're trying to say things. So I had a lot of difficulty for that period of time. And also, since it happened on the left side of my brain, on the opposite side from arm to leg, I had difficulty with my mobility, and also with my memory. My memory was affected about a percentage amount. So it was very hard. My first year, it
Yeah.
was very difficult.
Understood. I
Yeah,
was 37 when I had mine, and you were 35. Very young,
35.
man. Yeah, very young age. And then um, a lot of challenges. So, who was supporting you when you were at hospital? Was it your girlfriend at the time and other family members, or nobody able to come because of the lockdowns?
Yes. So because of the lockdowns and all that, the only person that I had the permission for that support was my sister, my older sister. So she would be the only one that just by phone, so not in person, because my family lived 2 hours away from the city. And since they lived very far away, the my sister was the only one that had communication with the doctors, with the nurses, and any specialist when it came to my case.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, after surgery, after you woke up from hospital, the first 7 days, you said about a week, you were in that situation.
Yes, for a week, and so they ended up not doing anything. I'm not too sure why,
Yeah.
and they let me go home.
Wow. So they
So
had drained the blood already out of your head, and then just sent you home.
they sent me home on a wheelchair. So what happened was that I ended up getting picked up by my sister, and I didn't go back to where I was currently living in the city. Instead, I went back to the countryside with with my parents who ended up becoming my caregivers.
So you had a, uh, you had to, they sent you home in a wheelchair. Did that mean you couldn't walk when you were sent home?
I could walk a bit, but not too well.
So there was no rehabilitation option? You didn't get rehabilitated? They didn't give you occupational therapy or anything?
They did that at home as well
Ah,
because
okay.
because of COVID. Ended up receiving rehabilitation at home when it came to walking, speaking, understanding, cognitive, and social worker and nutritionist. All of those types of therapists, they had to dress up in a suit as if as if they were going to see someone
Had
who's with
COVID.
with a virus or something.
Wow.
So it was like watching a movie.
Yeah, pretty crazy times.
Yeah.
So you did get rehabilitation. They did support you with therapy for speech and all that kind of stuff. How long did all of those therapies last? Was
So
it?
yes, that lasted for 7 months,
Wow, man. All at home.
all at home, uh, in person and also virtually, the way we're doing right now.
Yeah. Was it
Yeah.
virtually for speech therapy?
Yes, virtually it lasted longer than 7 months. For speech therapy, it lasted a year.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
That that's kind of cool that even though they were going through a really difficult time in Canada with lockdowns, with all the stuff that happened because of COVID, that you still got access to all of the necessary tools to help you overcome what it was that you went home with.
Yes, yes, I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful that I received the support that I needed and also the support of my caregivers, my parents, and my older sister, because mainly my older sister was the one that was on top of everything. So
Mm.
that way I may receive everything the moment that got um I got released from the hospital. She ended up getting everything that I needed, so that way I get that support automatically, um, right away, over the time. Yeah.
Wow, that's excellent. So, however, now you're living in different circumstances under lockdown, very difficult to access all these things. Like things are seriously have gone wrong for you, quote unquote, in your health journey. Okay. What is it like dealing with the emotional side of that?
Very difficult. I was very angry. I was very frustrated. I was very upset. I was confused. Those are the different emotions that I felt. And I believe that many other stroke survivors would feel the same way because I find it that whenever something has been taken away from you, then it hurts a lot. And it hurts you a lot because it's kind of like not being yourself anymore. So you have something that's been taken away from you. And so I did lose quite a lot. I lost my job. I lost the ability to drive. So I had to sell my car. And I also lost that relationship that I was in. That relationship ended. And I also wasn't earning any money as well. So the only caregivers were my parents. I had to live with them again. And for the past 4 years of recovery, which I'm still in that recovery stage of stroke, but I've improved a lot though. I've improved a lot, and which I'm very, very thankful. And and that just goes based on just having faith. And that's where I started to change my life. I started to change my life the moment I started to change my mindset, the way I think. And
Mm.
because the moment I started to change the way I think, It was the moment that I was just much more grateful for, even though I lost everything, I was simply grateful to be alive. And that was much, much more meaningful than everything that I had.
Than being grateful for a car, for example.
Being much grateful for having the second opportunity to live
Yeah.
when possibly I wouldn't be here telling my story.
Yeah. I totally get that. I went through a similar experience, gratitude. Even if you're not able to come up with something that's as meaningful as I'm grateful to be alive, like maybe you're grateful because, I don't know, there's a roof over your head, or, um, I don't know, somebody said something nice to you, or whatever. Like, you can be grateful about many things, but being grateful to be alive, wow, that was an easy one for me as well. I totally get it. That's what I went through. And I had another opportunity to make things right, to support myself in a different way, to think in a different way, to try different things, and experience things that I'd never experienced before. What what was the thing that kind of made you feel grateful to be alive? I know that. Do you know what I mean? There's a layer beneath that. It is, I'm alive, okay, but what does that mean that you're grateful to be alive? I get it, but there's more to that.
Mhm. Yes, of course. Yes, grateful for being alive because I have a second opportunity to change my life to something even better. When it
Wow.
comes to when it comes to helping others, when it comes to being a difference from our old self. Sometimes we don't get a second opportunity to reflect, but I had 4 years, and it's gonna be almost 5 years of r of the opportunity to reflect, of being thankful for, as you said, a place to live, for having my parents, for having my sister, and for having other loved ones that were there praying for me, so that way I may live and not die. And at the same time, just being able to walk, to see, to speak, to understand. I was able to regain all of that that was lost. So those were the reasons why I was grateful for.
Yeah. Your uh so your mindset and who you were and how you acted and how you behaved. Like, are you a very different person than the person beforehand? Like, what were the issues with your mindset? What were the issues with the way that you turned up in the world that you needed to tweak to be a better version of yourself back then? Now, I say that because many stroke survivors will say, I want to go back to how things were before stroke. And I'm like, I didn't want to do that. Like, that's not a good place to go. You're smiling, so I'm imagining that you think a similar way.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you, Bill. I find it that sometimes we don't change our old habits, let's say. Sometimes we carry habits or cycles in our life that we think it's good, but in reality is not something good that actually represents us or does good for others or even for ourselves. So myself, I can say that I had everything that I wanted, and I had the opportunity to do pretty much everything that I wanted, but at the same time, I wasn't completely happy. And at the same time, we carry certain bad habits because we think according to society, where society will will accept you based on the things and the patterns that you follow society. When it comes to doing certain bad habits that you think that's good, but in reality it's not really good because you're actually hurting and damaging who? Yourself, which is something internally, both mentally, physically, and emotionally. But over time, when you start to reflect on your old habits that weren't completely fulfilling or bringing that happiness or that peace or that joy, then in reality, it's nothing good. It's only for the moment. And sometimes we keep on rushing and doing things for the moment to get that pleasure, but that pleasure only lasts for a moment. So I had to change. And this recovery over these almost 5 years was a recovery not to just change myself, but to change the way I think, the way I speak, and the way I act, because it's a full connection. And that full connection is the reason why now what I'm currently doing is helping other people, other stroke survivors, and other people with disability and also mental health, because we find it that each day the world is getting worse, not better, but worse. Why? Because we live in a broken world. And the fact that we live in a broken world is the reason why there's many, many men and women that are looking for pleasure, but for the moment. And that's something that I had to learn for myself the hard way. Even though I wasn't in drugs, even though I wasn't an alcoholic, even though I wasn't doing harm to people, but I would still have bad vices or certain things that still didn't make me happy. So that's the main reason why.
Yeah, it's exactly my experience as well. Like I had some bad vices that were not ideal. They seemed minor, but the behavior, the habit behind it was not minor. It was major because it was there for many, many years. And if it continued to go on, it wouldn't be helping in a positive way. It wouldn't be achieving a positive outcome. It would be achieving something that my head thought was a good idea at the time, but not really something that is meaningful, purposeful, useful in life. Smoking was one of those things. I used to smoke, and people often, I had a friend of mine who would say that that thing will kill you if you keep doing it. And I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. That's a problem for Bill in the future. It's not a problem for Bill today. However, Bill of the future had a bloody brain and a brain AVM bleed in his head. So that became, at 37, really, that became a problem for Bill now. And I was smoking from about the age of 13, something like that, on and off. And my friend was telling me that from probably the age of 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It didn't take a lot of years to get to 37 and then be experiencing, negative impact of a health situation. And I realized that I've got to make some massive changes. And obviously, to me at least, it was the most obvious thing that I have to give up smoking. Also, alcohol, even though I wasn't an alcoholic, I had to stop drinking alcohol. And now I very, very rarely drink alcohol, uh, even 13, 14 years past the first bleed. I very rarely have an alcoholic drink. So it's amazing what came to my mind. I immediately knew the things that I had to change. No one had to tell me, oh, well, since you're um, having a stroke, since you can't walk properly yet, since your left arm doesn't work correctly, why don't you think about fixing this, changing that, doing this, doing that? No one had to tell me. Inside of me, instinctively, I knew what I was doing that was not supporting me, was not supporting my mission in life and my goal in life. And it was the easiest thing to change. I did receive some help though. I didn't do it alone, right? So I had a counselor, I had a coach, a life coach. I sought out the wisdom of people that were older than me, smarter than me, been on the planet longer than me, whatever. And I did it together with other people, not just on my own, because change is not very easy, especially when you remove an old habit and then you have to replace it with something. Initially, replacing it with something feels a bit strange, and you don't know if it's the right thing that you've replaced it with and how that's going to look like in 6 months or 12 months. So that's what I found, was that in order to help me find the right things to replace the things that needed to be left behind, I needed to seek the support of other people, counselors, coaches, etc. Did you have some support in that part of your recovery, so that you can kind of make sense of all the changes that were happening in your body, in your emotions, and in your life?
Yes. So I ended up joining a nonprofit organization here in Canada called March of Dimes. And March of Dimes provides support for stroke survivors, people with disability, and they have peer support, and it's a form of counseling with other stroke survivors, and they do this within all of Canada, and also through Heart and Stroke as well, which is another nonprofit organization, Heart and Stroke. So both of them, I would I would do this virtually where I would seek support to talk to someone based on what I'm going through, my thoughts, my emotions, and also telling my story. And from that moment, I said to myself, I want to do the same. I want to give back to the community and to other survivors. So I ended up becoming a volunteer. And for the past 3 years, I've been a volunteer at March of Dimes and also Heart and Stroke, where I ended up becoming an advocate for both nonprofit organizations. And you can also see me on their website on both of them, where it tells my story, but also the fact that I volunteer helping out people from the ages of 20 to the ages of 80 years old in 2 languages now. So I do it in English and Spanish. And it feels really, really good. It really does.
Yeah. We have very similar stories and journeys. So I went and connected with the Stroke Foundation here in Australia, and then became an advocate so that we can raise awareness about stroke, and then started doing some speaking on their behalf, at different organizations. And and like you said, like, it gives you a lot of purpose and meaning. It makes what happened to you worthwhile. It's a
Yes.
very important part of, well, why did this happen to me? Uh, I don't know. You could come up with a lot of negative reasons why something bad happened to you, but um, what am I going to do about this, and how can I transform this in a way that can help other people? Well, that is a better question to ask. And then volunteering is the best way to do that. I volunteered probably from 2013 through to about 2019. For about 6 years, I volunteered. And at the same time, I was running the podcast. I started the podcast in 2015.
Mm.
And it was just meeting other people who had understood me as well in those communities. That was fantastic. Being able to connect with people like that and feeling like, this person really understands what happened to me, because it happened to them in a different way, but they have a similar kind of recovery. And we are aligned in our mission to support others and make a difference, and not to make it just about us, because that's a really difficult thing to do. Is, you become anxious and depressed when you just make it about yourself. So making it about other people's stops that thinking pattern. Um, and I just love the journey that you're on, because you're very early on in the journey, and I can see it's going to continue uh, to be that kind of meaning making journey. I found that I said that I had discovered my purpose after the stroke. Now, you would have thought that somebody who was married, had 2 children, had plenty of purpose in their life, plenty of meaning. Why do I exist for my children? To support them, to teach them, to make them great men, to give them the opportunities in the world, in the community. Except they move out of home eventually, and then they become independent, and then your purpose and meaning has to shift. It cannot just be about them. You can include them in your purpose and meaning because you love them, they're your children, etc. In my case, But, they don't need me now to be the guy that shows them the way of the world and educate them and prepare them and all that kind of stuff. They are doing it on their own. When they do need me, they come for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We have a conversation and they're done. So it's important to uh, shift that energy that I had as a parent to other people who um, need support in the early days of their experience when they have a negative uh, health experience, so that we can help guide them through that adversity and overcome, and then maybe grow and be a better version of themselves in a few years down the track.
Yes, I think that it's important to be a good example, a good leader, whether it's at home or everywhere we go. We always need to be a good testimony. And the way I've learned that is also through my dad, which he taught me at a young age to be a man of righteousness, where he shows a good example through his good actions, but not only through words, but through actions, right? Because sometimes we may speak and say a lot of things, but we don't live it. But when you live it, it makes a huge difference. And whenever we show those examples, whether it's to anyone, any family members, strangers, or anything like that, we need to be like that everywhere we go. And
Yeah,
and that's something that I've learned a lot, that we need to be a good example to anyone.
yeah. I imagine that in the last 5 years you would have had some setbacks as well. What was the hardest challenge to overcome, do you think, for you? Was it physically or was it emotionally?
Uh, I think it was more emotionally than physically, and but but it's something that I was able to work on, because even myself, I ended up seeking support, and not only through these nonprofit organizations, but also within the church. So I ended up going to church, and I had one of the pastors being my mentor for a year and a half, and he ended up helping me out a lot. And it was a big amount of support that I received, also from my dad and my mom and my sister. So I always had a close family support. Yeah.
Yeah. The church is very common in people's recovery. You hear a lot about people perhaps reconnecting with their church, or even if they were still connected with their church, getting supported and having people turn up, provide food, provide counseling, provide encouragement, all sorts of things. Um, and it sounds like it's a fantastic community. And then you also hear from people who had non-church type of communities who come forward, support them, and give them the things that they need to kind of get them settled and in some kind of routine where they can continue recovery in their own way. Um, but there would have also been hard times, right? Where, because most people, and on my podcast, we talk about all the amazing things that stroke survivors do and they overcome, etc. But there's also really, really hard times. I went through, what I would call rock bottom moments, or found myself in the abyss. Did you find yourself there at all? Had you experienced kind of that really down, negative part of stroke in your mental state and your emotional state as well?
Yes, within the first year. So the first year was everything, like I mentioned earlier, about feeling angry, frustrated,
Mm,
sad, and all that. The first year was the hardest part of just not knowing what to do. And the only support was through my parents, that helped me a lot to kind of take away those negative thoughts, and also getting into the church where I had support with the pastor, and and then myself just changing my mindset where I had to start looking more to God, because I find it that without God, we're nothing. And based on my faith, that's what gave me the strength, the encouragement, and the joy that was taken away the moment I had my stroke. So my faith in God was what gave me the strength and gave me
Yeah.
the encouragement to move on forward.
Let's talk about faith for a moment, because people may not believe in God. Some people may not believe in God, a God, their God, whatever. But faith on its own as a experience is something that we, if we practice, is really supportive of recovery. So faith in ourselves, faith in the medical system, faith in any situation where we have to put our kind of our life in the hands of other people. That's what we're practicing. For people who don't have faith in God, or who don't have a God, or don't believe in God, you still have to practice faith, and you practice faith every single day. I want to go and receive one of my medications. You have to have faith in the medication that it's going to work for you, and it's going to actually do the job that it's meant to do. Keep your blood pressure down, for example. I'm on blood pressure medication. When I drive my car, I have to have faith that the other person is going to stay on their side of the road, and they're not going to come on my side of the road. And, 99.999 times out of 100, that's exactly what happens. You know, when I'm driving the car, once again, I have to have faith that the lights that I stop at are going to, in fact, when it's red on my side, it's going to be green on the other side. And at some point, it's going to switch, and it's going to go green on my side, and it will definitely go red on the other side, so that we don't collide. There's faith. We practice faith all the time throughout our day, throughout our whole life, without even really knowing it, and without needing to practice faith in a religious way, right? Um, and that's what I've kind of got out of my whole journey. Is I didn't find God so much, in that I see God differently these days. I kind of believe that God is me. I am God. God is within me. So when I request a solution, if I use the word God in the sentence, God guide me
Mm-hmm.
to find the answer to this difficult question, what I'm actually doing is I'm having an internal conversation with myself, and I'm asking myself, my unconscious self, to guide me to find the answer in this particular way. And that way I can combine God, the non-religious version of God, we'll call it spirit, or our
Mm-hmm.
creator, or whatever you want to call it. And I can embody that, and then make it part of me. And then in the right context, I can access the wisdom of God, the creator, nature, whoever, and I can be guided instinctively to follow my gut to an answer. And then if I go down a particular path that was not um, that way, and I find the wrong path, I can redirect, go back in, redirect, and go again. So I became, I suppose, more, maybe the word is spiritual. It's probably not the right word, but it's how I kind of practice my, what you might call, connection to God and faith. That's how I practice it. How does that sound to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, for me, it's having faith is believing without seeing. And whenever
Wow.
you build a relationship with God, is the moment that you start to learn who God is. And
Mm-hmm.
when you read God's word teaches us about his promises that he has for each one of his children, which God created, heaven and earth, and everything that we see. And the fact that we breathe and all that, that's God who does that. And there was this the other day I was reading, and it's in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, who's a prophet. And it was based on the story of a king, and the king is his name is Hezekiah, and Hezekiah had an illness. But not only that, it said, actually, can I read it
Yeah.
in a second? So it says in his book that it says in in Isaiah 38, it says, in those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, went to him and said, what is what the Lord says? Put your house in order, because you are going to die. You will not recover. Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion, and have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Then the word of the Lord came to Isaiah. Go and tell Hezekiah, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Azariah. I will defend this city. This is the Lord's sign to you that the Lord will do what he has promised. So when I read that, I said, wow, how amazing God is, that not only does he give promises to either kings and all of that during 2,000 years ago in history, and how God is still faithful to each one of us. Why? Because each one of us have a purpose. And because God has created us with purpose is the reason why his love and mercy is so great. And that's why I'm thankful for, because I know that God is faithful. And because his faithfulness, he's given me a second opportunity to live.
Yeah. So you take your Bible everywhere now.
I take his word everywhere in my
Yeah.
heart,
Yeah.
and I find it that his word is real
Yeah.
and is truthful, because without God's word, there's no life.
So what about before stroke? Were you somebody that knew the scripture? Were you somebody that had that type of connection to the word?
I didn't have that connection as much as I have it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And that goes based on, like we spoke earlier about having a relationship. It's not really following a religion,
Yeah.
is knowing that there's something greater than us.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
I agree with
And
that.
and
You
when
can
we know that there's something greater than us, then we can see that things change. But only things change only if we change ourselves in the inside. Because remember, this world that we live in, as I said earlier, we live in a broken world, right? A broken world where we find a lot of chaos and a lot of things going on. But without that love, without that peace, without that joy, that can only come through the creator, which is God. And that's the only way that you can actually be molded to the righteous man of who God has created in us. But we just need to know how to find that. And that way is through his word. His word teaches us that.
mm,
And the moment that we apply that to our lives day by day, the same way like with our health, our sickness, our weakness, or our insecurities, how can we change that? We can only change it the moment that we apply it into our lives little by little. And through that is the moment that we can see transformation and a step of moving forward and also breakthrough. Breakthrough is only done through changing our old selves, because our old self is very hard to break because we still carry that.
yeah. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Some people will be listening and going, well, if God is so good, why did God do this to me? You know, some people are far more injured because of stroke than you or I, even though your injuries and mine are all valid. There's people who won't walk again. There's people who lose their memory, who can't remember anymore. There's people who cannot get their speech back. There's people whose left arm, right leg won't work again. Then there's people who will pass away. And then some of those people find that they've been harshly treated by God, by their maker, their creator. Like, how do you talk to people like that to make them feel like it's not personal? God, your creator, your maker, has not gone after you and is not punishing you. Like, what do you say to people who lose connection with spirit, with God, with their creator?
Yeah. Well, what I can say is that God is so merciful, right? And because God's so merciful and through his love, we see in God's word that he died for us in the cross for our sins. And it's due to sin that we go through all these challenges. And that's the connection through a broken world that we live in, is because everything comes from sin. And sometimes it's hard to say, why is this happening to me? Or why am I not getting better? Well, everything goes back to sin. And because until until we accept Jesus Christ, but not only accept Jesus Christ, but at the same time, God allows certain things that we have to go through. We have to go through certain challenges or obstacles, right? But it's really hard to say. I find it.
Yeah, I,
Maybe to answer that question.
I actually don't mind the word sin when you use the word sin, because I've recently discovered some people's meaning of the word sin is to take an incorrect aim, to aim in the wrong direction. And I really relate to that. So when I sin, I don't kind of see it as a uh, you good, me bad. Like, I don't sort of see that type of thing. It's just aiming in the wrong direction. For example, previously, my life was led by my head. It was my head that was telling me, this sounds like a good idea. Yeah, we should have 3 cars. We should have the biggest house possible. We should do all of that. My head was guiding my life. Whereas now, my head is supporting my heart to guide my life. That's why the podcast exists, because the podcast is not about what my head thinks is a good idea. Because if my head thought it was a good idea, this podcast should be making a shitload of money, and it's not making a ton of money. That's why I request support from Patreon. That's why I wrote a book, to make a little bit of money so that I can cover the costs of recording, editing, uploading, hosting a podcast. Like, that's the reason why it needs to make money, but it doesn't need to make hundreds of thousands or millions and millions of dollars. My head in the old days would be going, dude, don't ever do 400 episodes of Stroke Survivors podcast. I'm not interested in that. And I would be going, okay, what do I need to do? And my head would be going, you need to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and make as much money as you can, so you can have all the things that we're told by the marketing companies that you need to have. I see that as a sin. Do you understand? That is the
Mm-hmm.
wrong aim. I've taken aim, dude, and I'm putting all my energy into the wrong things. Whereas now, I've taken aim and adjusted, and now I think I'm aiming in the right direction. It's about
Mm-hmm.
purpose, meaning, connecting with other people, helping other people, supporting other people. I'm no longer sinning in that particular way. That that's the literal description of the word sin. So it's really important that I learned that, because if I didn't learn that, I would be taking, when I hear the word sin, as a me bad, everyone else good. And that's definitely not what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think the bleed in my brain helped me adjust the aim, redirect where I
Mm-hmm.
was heading in my life, who was important, why they were important to me. Um, and my community is not a church, but I'm creating my own community on this podcast. 400 interviews, people who reach out from me all around the world. It's the same
Yeah.
kind of community, giving community, as a church community is. We support each other, we help each other, we give people information, we connect other people with doctors and condition and solutions. So it's like, yeah, that's what I was lacking. I was lacking community. I was
Yeah,
lacking
community. Yeah,
I was lacking people who understood me and who were similarly aligned to me. You know, I
yeah.
was connecting with people who were sinning in their own way because their direction was all wrong, and we were finding each other and we were making life harder for ourselves by
Mm.
being all in our heads and not connected to our body and our heart, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
that's kind of my religious journey without connecting it to a religion or to a religious chapter or to a church in a particular location. But I still feel like it's a religious journey, you know?
Mhm. Yes, like the moment that you build fellowship, as we're doing right now, we're sharing our stories and we're sharing our journey as stroke survivors. And through this story is what shows, which is what shows purpose and also can leave an impact to others, survivors. Because if we don't show a difference and if we don't help support other people, then what purpose do we have on this earth, right? We're here to help one another and to be different in a good way, because every single time we're always going to be going through different challenges, whether it's negative thoughts or everything that we see on TV, because every single time that we're looking at the news is always bad news, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all those negative thoughts are something that we are affected day by day. And the only way that we're able to overcome those negative thoughts is by putting ourselves surrounded in other things that can help us strengthen our mind, our body, and emotions. But that's something that takes day by day.
Yeah. I love it. I love your journey. I love our how similar we are in our path, even though we talk about it in a slightly different way. Um, it's leading a good example is something that was very important to me. I want to be a good example for my kids. In my book, the dedication says to all the stroke survivors who are dealing with the aftermath of stroke and despite it all are seeking transformation and growth. And that's the first part of the dedication. And the second part of the dedication says, to my family, I hope that I have set a good example.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Yeah, excellent.
my only goal. My only goal is to set a good example to show them
Yeah.
when adversity comes how you can respond. I think there's a way to respond that's wrong, and then there's many ways to respond that are right.
Mhm.
There's unfortunately, responding by going back to the way that you were before, I think is the wrong way to respond.
Mhm.
And then finding a new path forward, taking aim and choosing the wrong direction, sinning, and then readjusting and then going again in another direction, I believe like is the example that we need to set for other people, just so that my kids can see in the future when they go through a tough time, they go, I think I remember one way that my dad did it that might be supportive of my recovery down the path, and see, oh, okay, this is what dad did. I don't need to do what dad did, but this is kind of how he thought about that and how he approached that. That's really what I was setting out to achieve, and I think I've achieved that, and I feel really good about that. You know.
Yeah. No, I think that's excellent, Bill. I'm glad that you're able to create a podcast, and thank you for this opportunity, because I never thought I'd be able to share my story, and as well for the fact that your sharing was called that you created a book to tell about your stroke survival, and I think that that's going to impact many other survivors that are going through difficult times, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of people have bought it. I think there's at least 600 copies being sold at this stage. Um, and that's not a lot. It's not a million copies, but uh, it was never about the number. It was just about having it available, just so that people can come across it if they need to, and read it and just see a different perspective of how you can approach your recovery. You can get the book at recoveryafterstroke.com/book for anyone that's watching and listening. So, as we kind of get to the end of this interview, tell me what's next for you? What's on the to do list? What goals do you have that you want to achieve?
Yes. Well, what I've been able to achieve was that I ended up getting married this
Wow.
year. And
Congratulations.
thank you. It wasn't something expected because I thought maybe it's not going to be possible to meet someone based on my condition and everything, but everything changed. And so I got married on April 11th of this year. So I'm now married. And the other thing that I started this year was, besides the volunteering, I also created my own like small business when it comes to mentorship to help other people, which are people that are either stroke survivors, people with disability, and also mental health. And I created my website on that to help a lot of people. And it's nonprofit at the moment, which is donation based, and and I'm still helping in the community. I still volunteer, and I still help out in the church and many other places. So those are the things that I'm still currently doing.
Fantastic, man. So the website, we will have the links to all of the different social media and your website, etc., for people to follow if they want to connect with you. Uh, the the journey that you're on, you're calling it the project 21.
Yes. The reason I called it Project 21 because this journey that I'm going through is like a form of a project, and everything started in 2021. So that's why I decided to pick something unique and different and call it Project 21.
Yeah, fantastic, Jonathan. I really appreciate our conversation. Thank you for reaching out and joining me on the podcast. I love the work that you're doing and will continue to do. There's many, many years ahead of you of doing fantastic work. And I look forward to keeping in touch and finding out how your journey unfolds.
Yes, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. And thank you to Jonathan for sharing a story that takes a lot of courage to revisit. One thing I hope you take from this conversation is that recovery is never just physical. It's emotional, it's messy, it's confusing, but it is also an opportunity to rediscover who you can become. Jonathan's journey shows that healing doesn't always look like we expect, and sometimes the smallest steps forward end up becoming the most meaningful ones. If this episode helped you feel understood or gave you something to think about on your recovery path, remember to visit patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Some people believe their support won't make a difference, but that's an assumption that simply isn't true. Every contribution helps me continue producing these episodes, keep them online, and moving toward my goal of recording 1,000 conversations so no stroke survivor ever has to feel like they're going through this alone. And if you haven't already, you can also order my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. Many listeners expect it to be just my personal story, but it's actually something much more useful. It's the guide I wish existed when I was confused, overwhelmed, and trying to figure out how to rebuild my life after stroke. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for supporting the work in whatever way you can. You're not alone in this, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.